To make our 2x3 frame, we'll use a brad nailer, some T50 staples. I usually buy 3/8 instead of 1/2 inch because they're easier for the stapler to put into the wood. A good stapler, some wood glue, drill, and some screws, and about a yard of cotton duck canvas. You can get this at any fabric store. All you'll really need to do is just have them cut you off about a yard of material off a roll like this one. Will be plenty for this project. I'll also need a canvas stretcher. This is a very simple tool. It's basically a pair of pliers that has a jaw on it. And this will allow you to, once you've gotten the frame constructed, take the canvas, bite it inside of the jaw, and then wrap it down so that it's tight. I've got an 8-foot 2x4 here. Really, we only need 6 feet of material in the wood to make this frame, but I'm starting with an 8-footer here. Probably good to have a little extra anyway. And what we'll do is we'll rip this board in half. We don't really need a full 2x4 to support a 2-foot by 3-foot frame for a canvas. A 2x2 or 1.5 by 1.5 technically is plenty to support this frame. So we'll go ahead and cut the miters on this board together, and then we'll rip it in half, and then the lengths will be exactly perfect. We won't have to go back and cut the miters separately later. So we'll measure our 2-foot and 3-foot sections and go ahead and make our cuts. Now we have a 2-foot and 3-foot section of board with the miters cut, ready to go. Now that we have our boards ready to go on the table saw, we want to rip them right down the middle so that we can split the frame parts in half. So we'll measure it just at 1 3/4. And then we'll set up the table saw. Got to get the blade to cut all the way through the board, so we want to raise it up. And make sure that it lines up just with that line that we've drawn. Cut the other piece. Now we have all the pieces cut from the frame. And the lengths, of course, are perfect because we already cut our miters before we ripped them. So now we'll finish constructing the frame with some wood glue and a brad nailer. And we'll be ready to wrap the canvas. like to use more than one type of fastener to hold these things together because there's quite a bit of force that has to be applied to the frame to get the canvas stretched tightly around it. Put some screws in it too. Go ahead and ensure that it's strong. Since we're drilling into or putting screws into a 1.5 by 1.5, I'll go ahead and pre-drill them so that the boards don't crack. I also want to make sure that the screw head doesn't stick up above the edge of the board, and that if there's any rough spots or splinters that we get those cleaned up before we try to stretch the canvas, because they can rip the canvas when it gets pulled across it. When we measure the canvas to cut it, if we're cutting it off of a big roll like this, you want to make sure that you have 6 inches at least of extra materials in both directions. If you say 2 by 3, you'll want to add enough so that you can wrap the canvas around both edges. So if we have a 1.5 inch board that's square times 2, make sure that there's at least 6 inches extra from your 2 by 3 or whatever size you end up making your frame. So since we have a 2 by 3, here's our 36. We'll go ahead and make it 42. A good pair of scissors is all you really need to cut canvas. Since we already have this funny angle cut off here, we'll just go ahead and make it about like that. That should be a big enough, easily big enough piece to deal with so that we can grip it and wrap it around. So we're ready to start stretching. Now what we'll do is carefully place the frame in such a way that you can tell that the way, if you begin stapling it in this way, that there will be enough material all the way around to wrap. So you want to be able to grip the canvas and pull it and stretch it and then staple it on the back face. And you want to start in the middle of any of the dimensions. Do not start on the edge or on the corner. So we don't really need to pull it now because we're just now beginning, but the idea is we'll grip, pull the jaw around, and it will pull it tight behind it. So we'll go ahead and start by putting a couple of staples in the center. It may be that if you hit a hard spot or not, that the staple won't go all the way into the wood. That's not a big deal. Wait till you're done and then go back with a hammer and flatten all the staples out. So we'll go ahead and make sure that we get this stapled in good. So we got 3 good staples in. Now, we have 3 staples here, it's held in good. We'll go to the other dimension to start doing it over there. It's important to work opposite of where you started and then move opposite. That way, when you get to the corners, you don't find out that you've got baggy sections inside of your frame. You want it to be tight all the way around, all the way to the corners. It makes it a lot easier to draw on when you go to do your painting. It also makes it last longer and it look better after a few years. So we've got our first 3 staples over there. We're going to start over here, and now we're going to begin to pull. So we want to grip. We want to grip back as far as we can without stretching it too much. Wrap it around till we get a nice tight section right there, and go ahead and put a staple or 2 in. Now, we don't want to continue in this dimension here. We want to move to one side and do the same, working also from the center. So then we're going to work from the center and go out. you'll be able to see the fabric tightening behind it when you pull it. You want to make sure that you see that, so you don't want it to get baggy anywhere. It should be able to get tight like a drum. So we just keep working from the center out, never going more than one set out each time before you move to the opposite side. Same for these sides too. Continue to staple, move, and clamp until you get into the corners. And once you get into the corners, you'll get to a point where you won't be able to grip it anymore because of the other side of the frame. So now we've reached the corner. Go ahead and get it as tight as you can up into that corner. Now we'll just clean it up. Go ahead and fold it down. Pull it tight. Even when you can't wrap the jaw around the frame, this tool will still help you pull it. You pull it tight as it can grip better than your fingers can alone. Get it stapled down good. And you'll want to just go ahead and push that back in there. You can put a staple in there to hold it. And the same on the other sides. Just so that the excess material doesn't interfere with anything. And we'll just continue on the same with the other corners. Okay, now that I've got the canvas completely stretched, all the backing piece, the excess stapled down to the frame, and the corners pulled tight, we'll just go through, tap in any of the staples that didn't go all the way in. This will just keep them from interfering with anything later when you're going to hang the painting. Your finished stretched canvas should be very tight. It should be tight all the way out to the corners. Now we'll apply the primer. Canvas is going to really soak up this primer, which is good. What will happen is if you don't prime it, then your first coat of paint when you go to do your art piece is going to be very frustrating because it's going to soak up the paint just like it's soaking up this primer. Depending on how you plan to present your piece, you may want to go ahead and prime all the way over the edge. I usually do. If you're planning on putting it inside of a frame, which would probably cover the very edge of the piece in the front, you wouldn't really need to prime the edge. But it can't hurt to just go ahead and do it just in case. You may also want to make your painting continue onto the outside edge, in which case you'll definitely want to prime the edge. probably keep your brush strokes smooth. Make sure that you don't leave any ridges anywhere. It makes it a lot easier to draw on the canvas initially with a pencil when you don't have streaks of paint that have dried hard. You may for effect want to leave the ridges, but depends on what you're looking for when you start. I prefer a smooth finish whenever I begin to paint. And now it's all primed and ready for your masterpiece to be painted on it.